Hi there guys, Wrath here from tabletopminis.com and welcome to another episode of Age of Sigmar Tactics. So in this episode we're going to talk about maximizing the charge, getting the most out of that charge and how you can do the most damage in the combat phase possible. So there's many tips here, many different ways of doing it, and we're going to explore some of them, and hopefully you can learn a few things, get a few nice useful tips to use in your games that can help you do the most you can in your charge and assault phase. So let's start with tip number one.
Let's talk about turn order. So this can be really important to maximize the number of combats that you actually start. So if it's in the first half of the battle round, let's say you're the Stormcast player, and you decide that you want to enter combat in the first half of the battle round. So you enter combat, you do your attacks, the Chaos get to attack you back, but you've got the advantage here because you've attacked first. Now the second half of that battle round, the Chaos will definitely 100%, they will start the combat first, and then they can get attacks on your Stormcast. So you've managed to get some attacks on first, and then they've managed to get the attacks on first in the second half of the battle round. Now a more advantageous situation here would have been if you could have positioned the turn order so that you make the charge and you do the combat in the second half of the battle round. And by doing this, you attack first and you do your damage, and then they attack back. So you've got the advantage there because you've attacked first. And now you're into a new battle round. So because it's a new battle round, it's 50-50 chance who starts first. And potentially the Stormcasts, if they start first again, then they'll start combat. And that would have been a second round of combat where the Stormcasts have attacked first. So there's something to think about there. And if you can, positioning the turn or the combat, positioning your charge into the enemy and on the latter half of the turn to maximize the amount of combats you start first. And obviously there's other factors that depend on whether you can do that or not, but it's something to think about. Tip number 2. So in this tip we're trying to make a total number of units odd in the combat phase, and by doing this we can maximize the number of units and the amount of damage that we can do in the combat phase, because we are getting more of our units in combat than theirs is going to be in combat. So in this example here we've got 2 units of Stormcast. Now one potential situation here would be these Liberators could charge the Blood Warriors here, and these Liberators could charge the Reavers. Now what that would do, it would be in the combat phase, Stormcast go first, they do their damage, then the Blood Warriors hit back, then the Stormcast would attack the Reavers, and then the Reavers would attack back. So we've got 2 units that have attacked here in the combat phase, and they've got 2 units that have attacked in the combat phase. Now that sometimes can be the best way of doing it, but if you can, what you want is an odd number of units in combat. So an alternative option here would have been to charge both units into the Blood Warriors here, and by doing that, the Stormcast would start the combat, we'd get one combat with Stormcast, then the Blood Warriors attack back, and then we get another combat with the Stormcast. So we've managed to attack with both of our units, and they've only been able to attack with one of theirs. So them Reavers, because they aren't within 3 inches of any models, they can't actually enter the combat. So we've got a favorable combat situation here. So if you can, try and get an odd number of total units in the combat so that you can get more of your army involved doing damage in the combat phase than the opponent. Tip number 3. So make room for your models. And what we mean by this is try not to block models and make them charge further or make them have to charge further to get into combat. So if you're the Skaven player here, let's say you roll your charge roll for the Vermin Lord and you get, let's say, 10 inches. And you've got the choice. You can charge anywhere around the Stormcast Eternal Liberators here. You could put them right, you could put the Vermin Lord right here up in the front. But by doing that, what you've done is you've made that the Storm Vermin, now when they come to charge, they have to charge slightly further to get into combat. So what you've done is you've minimized your chances of getting the Storm Vermin in combat there. Something much smarter to do would have been to use that 10 inches to move your Vermin Lord around the side of the unit and enter into combat here, and now the Storm Vermin have a minimum move in the charge phase to get into combat with the Liberators here. So this is especially important with big units and when you have lots of combat going on. Thinking about placement of your models on the charge is really important. Because when you pile in, when your models, after they've charged, when they pile in, they have to pile in towards the closest model. You're quite limited in, you know, being able to get some of them bodies into combat. So it's really important to make space sometimes and, you know, move your models into strategically advantageous positions so that you can get the most of your models into the combat. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4 is avoiding Pileins. So this happens quite a lot accidentally, but when you have a lot of units on the table, quite often you'll see a charge go in here, then let's say the storm vermin charge in here, and without realizing it, putting models within 3 inches of another unit, in this example the Judicators. What that's done is it's allowed him in the combat phase to not only attack back with the Liberators, but to attack with the Judicators, because they're within 3 inches. And a much more favorable situation there would have been to keep your models 3 inches away. And this can be especially important when you've got heroes that are just kind of hanging around units, making sure that they're not within 3 inches of your units to be able to jump in and add to the combat. Tip number 5 is roll your decision-making charges first. So in this example, if you need the Vermin Lord to be in combat, otherwise you don't want to charge your Storm Vermin, make sure you roll for him first. So you don't move your Storm Vermin. If they make the charge and get into the combat there, and then your Vermin Lord rolls and he gets a double 1 and he stays where he is, that may not be a combat that you want to be involved in without the Vermin Lord. So roll him first and then you'll know whether you want to move the rest of your troops. And finally, tip number 6 is reach and using your reach. So what reach is using the people who have got long range on their weapons. So like Storm Vermin, for example, here have 2-inch reach. They can basically sit behind other models, other units, and still do their damage. So in this example, the Clan Rats could make their charge in here, and they could be on the front line. And the Storm Vermin, they only need to get one guy within ½ an inch of the enemy, and then the rest of them can sit behind the Clan Rats like this, and they can do their attacks because they've got a 2-inch range. And also you can use reach to protect guys. So this 2 inches, they can sit back quite far and they can do their damage. And the Stormcast here with their 1-inch reach can't even get to them. So it can be used quite well to get the maximum number of attacks in and also protect your hard-hitting but maybe quite fragile units. So there you go, folks. That concludes our article on maximizing the charge. So I do want to emphasize that this article is just about maximizing the charge, and there's a lot more depth into the combat and combat order and all sorts of other things that haven't been covered, and we will cover them in future episodes of these tactics videos. So I hope this also gave you some new things to think about in your games, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.